Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic part 2. Which is what if Naruto and the Kyuubi became one part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. He walked through the city looking at the buildings to see if there were any weak points that could be destroyed by a tail and would cripple troop movement a little. So far he had only noted 3 paths that would be able to slow down any defenders if he released the Kyuubi upon the village. With a grin on his face he looked at the villagers who shot him cold looks. He felt the rage beneath their glares and he was glad to say that he too felt rage but of a different kind. This rage within him was even more powerful since it made him prone to go into a fury which could easily kill off most of the population of the village with shinobi included. The reason for not killing them at the moment was that there was someone in the back of his mind who kept on telling him that he needed to restrain his anger for some time until Sarutobi was dead. Something about giving the old man some time to live. Still anger coursed through his veins and even though he had genjutsu on his face it twisted into an angry snarl which made the villagers leave a large circle of free space around him. He didn't care as long as they didn't get in his way. He came to his house and opened the door to see Haku lying on the couch asleep. He gently walked up to her and studied her sleeping body. He didn't particularly do very much with it but just studied her delicate features and smiled gently. His ears caught some movement and he turned around to see the Hokage standing there looking at the sleeping woman. The old man calmly walked up to him and spoke in a whisper. I made sure she got home safely. She had a very exhausting day and when I came to pick her up one of the Junin told me that she had worked to exhaustion to prove that she belonged there. She must have been eager to please you. Naruto-sama, the young woman murmured something softly and Naruto momentarily smiled before he got serious once again. Jisen, I think I'm going to train tomorrow with Haku-chan, so if you would please inform Kakashi-sensei that I won't be showing up for training then I'd be grateful for that. The old man smiled knowingly and said, so you might want some free time with your girlfriend, isn't it? Well, Naruto-kun, I'll pee them the message that the both of you are going to train together and that none of you are available for any missions during that time. I'll take care not to IGN any missions to either of you. Naruto kept his face neutral and he reached in his clothing and withdrew a small book from it. Here is the second volume. Did the first volume get good reviews by the readers? I haven't had any time to see if it is well received. The old man chuckled and said, after it was printed the entire first edition was sold out within 3 hours. The second edition is being printed as of now. I'd like to thank you for the cover that says that it's a training manual for learning how to garden. Actually the publisher thought it wise to make 3 covers for it. It's only different from any other training manual because there is some gold lining on the title. The man flipped through some of the pages and giggled perversely when he came to a scene which depicted an action which should have been painful to say the least. It's not every day you see a girl getting raped by 9 tentacles in every orifice they could find. The Sandaime looked at the pages and wondered if his student would be publishing one of his novels once again. The doujin that Naruto made were as good as Jiraiya's work and the genius that kid had gotten from his father seemed to be flourishing. The talent the kid had was astounding. The Sandaime walked through the streets thinking about some things. How long had it been when he remembered a bright blue-eyed boy running through the streets following his teacher and coming up with jutsu that were efficient and useful in combat situations. Yondaime, sometimes I wish you were still alive. With that the old man entered his home and put the doujin in his folder of things that he had to do tomorrow. Naruto in the meanwhile had just decided that Haku should lie somewhere comfortable. He had picked her up and carried her to his bed and put her into it. He briefly looked at the taller girl and decided that it couldn't do any harm that he was to lie next to her. He slipped out of his jacket and other things and got in the bed. He felt her skin against his and he shuddered slightly when he felt a cold chill roll over his spine. The next day was filled with action for the young boy. He looked at the ceiling when he awoke and heard a startled gasp come from Haku, who had seemingly wrapped herself around him. With a small smile on his face he gently untangled himself from her and then decided that it would be a good thing to put on some clothes. After he got dressed he looked at his roommate and said, Haku-chan, I asked Hokage-san to give you and me a day off so we could train with each other. I have a feeling that we should hone our skills because something that will be catastrophic will happen soon. After having a quick dinner, the two demon carriers went off. Haku had left her hair loose this time and was the subject of many stares from the local men. Naruto just glared at the people who dared even glance at Haku with eerie light blue eyes. He sure knows how to scare people, Kyuubi. It's not often that you see that old guy fall on his ass. I remember him and Sarutobi-sama talking about their days as a genin. I can't imagine how that guy got to be on the council. He still hates Naruto-kun for possessing you, don't you think so? Indeed. All you foolish human scum seem to think that he is the one who destroyed your pathetic village, and even as you were there, Shadow, you died and were locked in here with me. I might have died and was put in here with you, but at least I know something that you wouldn't even dare guess. I know, for instance, how to make it so that you can manifest into a true human body with the power being copied to that body while leaving Naruto with your infinite chakra. I won't go into details as of now since it would distract him too much, but it could be done if I managed to figure something out first. The mysterious person stepped into the light and a cape became visible with flames licking the lower part of it in a motif that was cool. A ninja outfit accompanied that, and on the back there was the kanji for the number 4. Blonde hair framed the face and a smile could be seen on that same face while blue eyes looked at the woman looking at him with something of a glare in her eyes. Let's start. With that, the fight was on. Naruto began to tap into the chakra of Kyuubi, which made the air around him begin to waver and act like incredible heat was given off from his body, while Haku's chakra seemed to let the plants around her die with ice forming on the dead leaves. Naruto was the first to act and he jumped at Haku, who dodged the boy and formed one-handed seals and ice mirrors appeared. Naruto was within the mirrors and he noticed that in every one was an image of Haku wielding something that looked like a sword of sorts. Then in a flash she came out of one of the mirrors and a deep cut came upon Naruto's right shoulder. He watched as it healed immediately. A change came over the boy and his nails changed into claws and his whisker marks became more pronounced. The chakra began to gather around him as he tapped into more of the power that was addicting to use. Red eyes scanned every mirror and a tail ripped out of flesh coming out of the tailbone. It looked like a normal fox's tail except that it moved like it had its own life. So the little girl wants to play. Kyuubi was watching the battle between her container while the Yondaime was watching it from Naruto's eyes instead of just watching from behind the seal like Kyuubi did. He had the rare privilege of being able to access Naruto's eyes to see what was going on without having to peer past the bars of the cage. It didn't give him control about Naruto's body, but it was handy to look and maybe implant suggestions into the boy's mind. Naruto looked at the girl who he was fighting with and with a grin on his face he jumped at one of the mirrors and smashed it to bits. Then his tail lashed out and destroyed 3 ice mirrors. A rain of senbon followed by swords came from the mirror. Any normal Junin would have been dead long by now, but this battle was different. Demons were fighting this, and if not for their healing powers both of them would be dead now. The tail destroyed most mirrors except for 3. Naruto looked at the 3 mirrors and said, Haku-chan, if you wish to beat me, face me head on and we'll see who wins, taijutsu only. With that he was gone from her sight and she grunted as his fist embedded itself deep in her side, making her being propelled backwards away from him. She was launched through several trees by the force of the blow but just shrugged it off. Her outfit was getting all dirty but she didn't care at the moment. All that mattered was the fight and she didn't even seem to notice the stunned looks of the genin team standing there where she had stopped her movement by slamming her sword into the ground. She brought up the sword and her Junin jacket briefly hindered her movement a little since it had been moved since she had been launched through trees. Naruto came from the trees with the red chakra swirling around him in a chaotic pattern. Within the blink of an eye he was gone and Haku blocked the strike with her sword and then jumped out of the way with Naruto following her. Claws became blurs as they scratched at her face. Blood was dripping from the wounds that Naruto inflicted and suddenly ice mirrors sprang up and Haku appeared holding her sword. You said taijutsu only and that's what I'm going to do. You never said there was a ban on Kekai Genkai. With that she flashed at him in a blur of movement that was almost hard for him to follow. He felt his eyes sting because of some pain that was collecting within them and suddenly he closed them and bloody tears came out of his closed eyelids. Haku just attacked him while his body reacted on autopilot and dodged some strikes. Makoto's Kekai Genkai is awakening. Yuhu, he shall beat his girlfriend with that one. What are you so happy about? He has a Kekai Genkai, so what? The Yondaime smiled and said, normally it wouldn't be very much to think about, but if you think about it you should realize what this means, especially with his Kekai Genkai. Zhu, watch and see what happens. The world slowed down around him as he opened his eyes. There was Haku-chan coming at him with her sword, intent on stabbing him. He watched as she came at him in slow motion, and then when she was close he grabbed her. Then he swung her around in circles and then let go, and the girl crashed with force into the unforgiving earth, knocking her out by the pressure put upon her body as it hit the earth. He looked at her and the stinging in his eyes had gone away. He turned around to look at the Genin team and recognized them as the team he was with the previous day. The two boys seemed to be stunned to see him take on a Junin while the girl just looked with those white eyes. Their sensei seemed to be looking at his eyes, so he said, "What?" She snapped her gaze away from those haunting eyes. They were red with two tomos in it. The Sharingan had manifested in the eyes of the carrier of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. To her this was a haunting thought, because if word got out that the carrier of the Kyuubi possessed those eyes, someone might come and gauge them out to use the Sharingan. The only explanation for their appearance must be that the mother must have been one of the Uchiha clans, since no other clan had that eye. Please close off the chakra flow to your eyes, Naruto-kun. She said it in a way that brooked no argument, and she looked and saw that the eyes had returned to their normal blue color. She sighed and said to her team once Naruto had gone away while carrying Haku, "I want none of you to tell a living soul that he has those eyes. If enemies find out about him having those eyes, then the secret of the Sharingan would be lost forever, since Naruto isn't as protected as Uchiha Sasuke. Do you promise me that you won't tell? And Kiba-kun, if you tell anyone for some stupid reason, then I will track you down and neuter both you and your dog with a rusty knife, and then will put one of my worst genjutsu on you just to make sure that you won't tell anyone again, ever." The boy paled, and Kurenai knew that she had gotten the message through. Kiba was the only one who was a loudmouth and could probably tell anyone about them. Shino would be silent about this from the moment she told them to keep silent. Hinata would keep silent just because she was too shy to talk louder than a whisper. The fact that she trusted her teacher was also something that would help with the matter. But she really needed to work on her confidence. While Kurenai mused, Naruto was busy with getting the young woman in his arms back to some semblance of consciousness. He had tried shaking her gently, but she wouldn't awake. Deciding that it would be cruel to just throw some water over her to wake her up, he decided to do it in an alternate way. After all, Kyuubi had said to him that he should have some fun. He gently brushed some hair out of the way and decided that he should sit down for this. If she moved rather suddenly, it left the option open for them to crash onto the floor. "Come on, son. Kiss her." Yondaime's comments rang through the small space that was the cage where he had been locked with the Kyuubi for some time. Said Yukai was looking at the man while smirking in a vulpine way. Naruto-kun should try to please her. Maybe she'd even allow him to mate with her. That'd be a sight. By the way, now that we are talking about mating, where do you think your mate is buried, oh great moron? Don't call me a moron. People out there still think of me as the genius who saved them all from you. And I don't know where my wife is buried. You should know, since you knew that that prick took my wife and disguised her as his wife who died in your attack. While the unlikely pair continued their argument about the dead wife of the Yondaime, Naruto had decided that action needed to be taken, and he sat down on a bench close to the Shinobi Academy. He sat Haku on his lap and watched as her head moved like she were some sort of lifeless puppet. He lifted her head gently and kissed her on the lips softly. He was kissing her for about 10 seconds when he suddenly saw her eyes open. He looked into those brown orbs and watched as they looked at him with love. The idea of her loving him, Yukai, was laughable, but while she did look at him, he knew that she had feelings for him. She was the one who took the action after that, and she kissed him fiercely. Hearing a sound nearby, Naruto's head snapped in that direction to look at a certain Junin wearing a Hitai over his left eye and his only visible eye without a Sharingan in it, expressing his mirth at having caught the pair in an intimate position. "Could you please leave, Kakashi-sensei? I think I was busy here and we could do without your presence for now." With that, he glared at the older man, who just laughed and said, "I just wanted to say that I understand it that you wanted a day off. I saw that Haku-san was also free for the day and I put 2 and 2 together and went to find you." Naruto gave the man a skeptical look and saw a small cover of a book sticking out of the man's pocket. I take it Pinky will be blown away after she sees what you are reading right now. The manual for using the correct amount of fertilizer on pot plants I'd like to see Pinky's face when she sees that it is in reality a doujin made by Uzurame Narutoki. Kakashi just nodded and said, I'd like to thank you for writing it. The artwork is truly sublime. I got it the moment it was published. Hokage-sama tipped me off when I went to see him because you had scheduled a break. Naruto nodded and said, well then I'd like to think that you would be here for just a chat but we got to talk. Why the he? My head. Naruto felt an ungodly amount of pain directly in his head and he blacked out after a few minutes of screaming his head off. He stood behind the familiar bars and there stood a man with blonde hair in the Hokage jacket that Sarutobi had once worn in an old picture of him taken when the man was around 40. The man looked familiar to him and suddenly he realized who exactly he was talking to. The Yondaime Hokage was standing right in front of him and he didn't even bow before the man like any normal Konoha shinobi or citizen would have done. The entire opposite happened. What do you want? Yondaime was taken aback by such behavior of his son. He sighed and said, I'm sorry I had to seal her into you but I had no other choice. Else we would all have died. I'm sorry, son. That statement took away all of his mental faculties as the words were processed by his brains and the machine halted as the Yondaime had called him son. So he was the only son of the yellow flash of Konoha. Then the bastards could have treated him a lot better than they had done. He felt the rage once again boil through his veins and he looked at the man while he suddenly began to grow fur over his body while tails came from his tailbone and claws grew. Kyuubi sat there on a couch reclining like she had no worries in the world while only wearing a very thin outfit. Alright, what do you want, Otusan? Yondaime looked sadly at his only son and said, I want you to give Konoha their final judgment. If they don't change their ways then I fear that I would be the last Hokage to ever grace this village because destruction of the village would follow if they were judged to be condemned. Then his eyes looked into the red ones of his son and he spoke, I want you to find the grave of your mother. I want you to go there tonight and let Kyuubi take over. I shall make sure that she shall not destroy everything in sight. Your mother's name was Uchiha Makoto. Although that was the name that she is buried under, her real name was Uchiha Miko. You possess the Kekkei Genkai of the Uchiha clan, son. I want you to use it in a time of emergency or when you need to win. Coupled with her power you would be nigh invincible. He waited a few seconds to let all the information sink into his son's skull and then sighed. The time he had to talk to his son was short but at least he could help out a little bit in the Chunin exam. He imagined it wouldn't be very difficult to just help him by teaching Naruto some of his signature moves. That way Naruto wouldn't need to talk with the man he had once called sensei, although it was rather funny to see the man getting launched up in the air by one of Tsunade-san's punches. I'd like to offer you something that should benefit your training. I want you to use one of my moves in the Chunin exams so that you could show to the world that you are my legacy and not some sort of demon hell bent on destruction. Naruto just raised an eyebrow and said, but I'm a yokai who's going to destroy much of the village before I'm either stopped by someone sealing me into some kid's stomach or I get bored and leave. Yondaime shrugged and said, doesn't matter a thing, son. Know that I'll always be there for you. By the way, I wanted to tell you one more thing before I let you return to consciousness. If you are going to have with her then I'd like it if you used protection. Think of it as a worried father to a son who never had the talk but instead managed to get the attentions of a kitsune. And if you meet an old guy who calls himself the Holy Sennin of Toads or something, give him a kick right between the legs, would you? I still haven't forgiven him for even trying to make me spy upon women bathing as training for my stealth. Although I and your mother met while I was doing that, he still deserves to get kicked inside one of those baths. Quote. Naruto nodded and the Yondaime smiled kindly upon his only son and said, if you ever meet a woman named Tsunade, I want you tell her that Arashi said that she'd need to know that Jiraiya has peeked on her in her ice stand. That should be entertaining to see the fight between the two of them. Naruto just shrugged and said, I take it that your first name is Arashi. Arashi just nodded and said, tell Kakashi that he's slacking off too much and that he'd need to put Obito to rest. A sigh coming from Kyuubi made both of their heads turn and Arashi took one look at the kitsune before holding his nose with some blood seeping out of it. It seemed that she had wanted to make the old guy faint of blood loss before Naruto left, as she was currently stimulating her private parts with a hand. Naruto just chuckled and felt himself awake in the land of the people who lived to annoy him. He opened his eyes to see Kakashi looking at him with a worried look in his only visible eye. Haku stood next to Naruto's bed with a look that spoke volumes. The Hokage stood also next to the bed with a worried frown on his face. Was currently looking at Kakashi and stopped mid-sentence apparently. Naruto looked at Kakashi and said, "You shouldn't mourn about Obito too much, Kakashi-sensei. It makes you late and Arashi told me that you should be on time." Then he looked at Haku and said, "Sorry for the scene, but apparently the Yondaime had need for me. I was summoned into the cage where I met him and the Kyuubi playing shogi. And Hokage Jisun, before you ask, I'd like to ask you something." "Who is Tsunade?" The Hokage just smiled and said, "One of my students. An excellent medical shinobi and currently traveling." "Why did you want to know?" Naruto didn't reply immediately and said, "I should meet with her one time. I'd need to tell her something about some guy named Jiraiya, and Yondaime-sama told me to give a kick between the legs to one old guy who called himself the Holy Sennin or something. I wonder if the Kyuubi has won something. Not much to do there except for some stupid games that apparently appeared there." Sarutobi winced as the boy in the hospital bed spoke about kicking his student right between the legs. If what he thought was true, then a kick in the balls wouldn't be the least of his students' worries if Naruto told his only female student something about Jiraiya, which probably involved peeking on her. Tsunade's fury was well known to the old man. That freakish strength was useful in deterring the pervert. Naruto got up from the bed and looked at Haku, who just stood there. A smile made its way to Naruto's face, making it look like he had just come up with something devious. Within a flash he had pressed his lips to Haku's and he watched as her eyes went wide for a few seconds and then she relaxed and gave in to the kiss. The two older men looked at the kiss without any shame. Actually, Kakashi was blushing a little while the Sandaime just looked at the pair. After a few minutes they parted and Naruto said, "Now I'm ready to go. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei, Hokage Jisun." With that he scooped Haku in his arms and although it looked odd he carried her over the roofs towards their apartment. When they were about halfway there, Naruto noticed that same boy standing there with the sand swirling around him. It appeared like the seal had been broken again because the malicious presence of Shukaku was once again easy to feel. "Hey, here is the bastard once again. Let's get him." "I second that." Two voices spoke at once in his head and Naruto abruptly halted and looked at the boy with the red hair. He looked at Haku and said, "Would you please go to our apartment, Haku-chan? I think I need to have some words with that boy and it's not going to be pretty." Haku nodded, knowing about Kyuubi hating the Shukaku because of an incident in the past. Her demon had told her about it when they had communicated one time during training with her old master. It had told her all about the rivalry between those yokai since the dragon had once been a loyal subject to the Kyuubi and said that her mistress wasn't pleased with the Tanuki demon. In a swirl of fire Naruto appeared right behind the boy and in a voice which was a mix of his own and Kyuubi's he spoke. It sounded evil and ominous. "Shukaku. How dare you even show up here? This is my village and I will not allow you to destroy it." A kick rammed straight through the sand armor, letting the young boy crash into the ground from the house he had been standing on. He created quite a dent in the street and he landed next to a blonde girl who was with a guy wearing black and face paint and something wrapped on his back. Currently all were staring at the boy who had been slammed hard into the ground. "How dare you?" Gaara scowled at Naruto, who just glared at him and said, "Blonde Kyuubi carrier said, I'd mind your mouth, Shukaku. You aren't even in possession of his body. I on the other hand am." Gaara looked frightened after that sentence while his companions looked in something that could be described as fear at Naruto. He had the gall to boss around their little brother. Naruto looked at the sand siblings and appeared in a flash next to Temari and took her hand in his. "Your beauty is as astounding as a fresh shower of water in a hot desert, milady." Then he kissed her hand in a gentlemanly way which had the side effect to make her blush and her brother to growl in anger. Gaara was still pale at the revelation that Shukaku's worst enemy was here and could be unleashed at will. But why did he act that way with his big sister? And why the hell was she so red in the face? He filed that away for later. Temari looked at the cute boy who had kissed her hand and the blush that heated her face increased. They didn't have such boys in Sunagakure. Well, at least none who dared to talk that way to Gaara. Actually, she never had met a single guy who could talk to Gaara and even insult or hurt him in any way, and this one had just managed to do that. May I perchance know your name, miss? He asked her and looked her into the eyes. She smiled kindly at him, which drew wide eyes from her brother Konkuro, who never had seen her smile at any guy who tried to get her to go out with her, because she usually blasted them away with one big gust of wind of that blasted fan of hers. My name is Sabaku no Tamari, she said shyly, and Konkuro's eyes widened. She had never spoken like that. Naruto took that as a cue and said, pleased to meet you, Tamari-san. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. He gave her a dazzling smile, which made a nearby Junin dressed in green spandex rave about the power of youth and the explosion of vitality and youth. His student, dressed in the same spandex outfit but just a few sizes smaller, wondered if he could be such a great guy too. Naruto just smiled at her and said, are you here for the Chunin exams? He asked, and she answered, hi Naruto-san. We are here to represent our village of Sunagakure. That moment there was a pink-haired girl coming onto the scene, and she pointed a finger at the pair and spoke with that loud and obnoxious voice, there you are. Naruto looked at her and said, what do you want, Pinky? Should I tell Haku that you acted all rash once again? I'm sure that she would punish you quite severely, especially after you made it pretty clear that you wanted nothing to do with her being from another village and all. Are you going to do the same to Tamari-chan here? Sakura looked at the boy in front of her who had just insulted her. Then inner Sakura came out and screamed inside her head, punish him for his insolence. Smash his skull. The outward action of Sakura was a physical one. She stomped up to Naruto, not unlike some tomboy in another dimension who was doing the same to a pigtailed young man. Then he was thrown backwards by a smack to the face. A look of cold hatred came upon his face, and Arashi's eyes widened. He had to step in, or else the entire village would be slaughtered by the act of that foolish girl. He knew that his son wasn't the calmest person on the face of the earth. In reality, he could ignite in anger at almost anything that irked him enough. A change washed over Naruto's face as Arashi took over and grabbed the girl's wrist and said, that's enough, young lady. You have no right to hit me. In all my years I have never seen one such as rude as you are. The voice was deeper than she knew, and she looked at the young man who she was holding. He had the same look around him as her teammate, but something was off. This man was obviously older from the manner of speech and of course the fact that his strength was greater than Naruto's. She looked at the face and saw that it resembled Naruto's and deduced that this must be the boy's father. Gomen nasai, sir. I meant to hit my teammate for being obnoxious. Arashi's eyes narrowed and he took a deep breath and said, have your parents never taught you to analyze the situation before storming into something? Seeing Sakura nod in affirmation, a creepy smile made its way onto the Yondaime Hokage's face, and he turned around and looked at his predecessor who had just arrived. Sarutobi-sama, please allow me to teach this girl some lessons in manners. I'm sorry for leaving the village, but I'll have you know that I fully support my son in his authoring. A perverted grin came on the Yondaime's face, but it left soon. The Hokage just looked amused at the Yondaime and was about to say something but was rudely interrupted by Sakura. So you are a Nukenin then? So Naruto's father is a dirty and slimy bastard of a Nukenin. Sarutobi looked stunned at that and watched as his successor turned a brilliant shade of red in anger at this girl. Ah well, she brought it upon herself. Arashi had enough. So she dared to think that he, the greatest of all Hokage of Konoha, was one filthy Nukenin. That would need some retribution. Little girl, if you were to look at the Hokage monument, tell me which face is next to the Sandames. He spoke in a dangerously low voice. The Yondaime, of course. Then she turned to look at the face of the Yondaime and then looked at the monument. As realization sunk in, she turned a pasty shade of white until her skin could be seen. She had just insulted the Yondaime Hokage, who had seemingly returned from the realm of the dead. With a sigh, she keeled over unconscious. Arashi just blinked and said, ah well, at least she soiled herself. That's something of a punishment for her. I think I need to go again, Sarutobi-sama. It's been nice scaring the girl and seeing you again. With that, his face and stature turned back into Naruto's. Said kid looked around confused and said, did something happen? He looked around confused at the Hokage, and the old man just smiled at him and said, I just had a talk with an old friend of mine, Naruto-kun. Naruto then shrugged and said, wasn't Pinky here a few minutes ago? Then his eyes grew wide as he realized something. Haku's gonna kill me for being late. He looked at Tamari and said, see you in the Chunin exams, Tamari-san. Blowing her a kiss, he disappeared, leaving behind an amused Hokage and two confused teens and one blushing girl who would later let her brother experience flight by a gust of wind from her fan as he teased her about it. Gaara would just glare at the two of them and tell them to never mention anything of what just happened to anyone, or else the sand would crush them. The fear that the Kyuubi had instilled in him made him uneasy. And thus he acted odd the entire time they were at their hotel. Even Baki, their Junin sensei, noticed it and was afraid to awake Gaara's ire. When he got home, he looked at the door and slowly pushed it open. To his great relief, he watched Haku standing there apparently busy cooking something. She seemed absorbed in her work, and Naruto snuck up on her and let his arms encircle her waist while he said, hello Haku-chan. Her reaction was one a girl would make when amused, and Naruto was greatly relieved when she giggled. Fufufufu, Naruto-kun, did you teach that guy not to mess with you? I'm now busy with making dinner for the two of us, and when I'm finished with it I'll tell you that dinner is ready. Naruto knew that no disaster would occur, and he went and sat down on his couch and began to meditate about all the things he had seen today. The message from Kyuubi was the main topic he meditated about, and the only thing that would be a bother is the agreement of the girls. If they started to fight about him, then it would lead to destruction. Kyuubi basically had given him the green light to get as many women as he wanted and to create offspring with them. That meant some physical labor for him, but at least it was nice to do. A little bit of drool dripped out of his mouth as he began to fantasize about Haku's well-toned body. Behind the seal, Arashi was losing to Kyuubi, who was cheering as he lost some clothing. They were playing strip poker and the kitsune had won almost every time. Well, she never lost more than one piece of clothing and was smirking as the Yondaime removed his pants. I quit. With that, he clothed himself. He always played until he was in his underwear because he didn't want to make his son angry with him for letting his girlfriend aka Kyuubi see his father. And also because he hated being in the. He didn't look at the pair whenever Kyuubi and Naruto would go at it. It didn't interest him in the least to see a Yukai queen and his son each other senseless. If only he got some action in the real world, then it could all be easier. If only his wife were alive. Remembering that he had asked his son to go the graveyard that evening, he knew that Kyuubi was up to something, and it probably wouldn't be good for someone. He knew that she would often get angry just because she had watched through Naruto's eyes without the boy knowing it and saw the glares. Somehow he believed that the Kyuubi really cared for his son and not just as some sort of toy to play with and then kill once she had got enough out of it. Naruto awoke from his meditations as the door opened and the girl who lived with him appeared from the doorway holding some bowls of rice and hot sauce in her hands. Naruto got up and got the rest of dinner, and so he sat on one end of the table. He looked at her and said to her, "Itadakimasu," then the dinner began. Naruto ate slowly while thinking about the positions he and Haku probably could do if they decided they would feel the need to go and have some hot steamy. He was probably looking distracted or something because he faintly heard Haku remark something, and he snapped back to attention. "What did you say?" "I asked if you would like some more rice." She answered, and he nodded and his bowl was refilled. When the dinner had ended, Naruto gave her a smile and said, "I have some things to do, Haku-chan, and probably will be away for some time. Kyuubi asked me to go to the cemetery to do something, but she hasn't told me exactly what that was. Maybe she just wanted to train there or something." Haku nodded and said, "Be back soon. I don't want to be alone for a long time." "I don't want to be alone without you." Smiling confidently, Naruto answered, "Sure, I'll do whatever she asks me to and I'll be back after that. Don't worry, it's not as if she's gonna let me awake the fury of the dead there or something." With that, he got out of the house and closed the door behind him. Within 10 minutes he was in Konoha's cemetery, and it looked kinda spooky with all those graves. A thought came to his mind that there would be a lot more graves filled when he attacked the village. "Go to the grave of Uchiha Makoto and wait there for my instruction." Without questioning her orders, Naruto searched the graves of the Uchiha family, a family to which he should belong to as he had manifested the Sharingan. He stopped before the grave of Uchiha Makoto and waited for Kyuubi to tell him what to do. "I'll take over for now. With that he felt detached from his body as his eyes turned red and a menacing reddish aura enveloped him. His hands began making demonic seals and a long sequence of seals was made before he spoke out with his voice all Kyuubi-like. Kinjutsu. Rebirth of the corpses. He watched as his chakra seeped into the grave and a body was pulled from the ground without any meat on it. Then there was chakra enveloping it and flesh began to grow until there was a female body floating in the air held there by chakra. Then the chakra disappeared and Naruto felt slightly faint. He began to sway in the wind like some leaf and he suddenly lost his balance and fell on his because the chakra had literally burned through his chakra coils at a pace which was enough to kill someone less they had some regenerative properties like he had. You brought back my wife. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Arashi was ecstatic to see his wife back alive. Naruto just looked at her and sighed as he almost fainted due to exhaustion. His mother stirred and opened her red Sharingan eyes with only 2 dots in it. Where am I? The last thing I know is that Arashi-kun visited me while I was birthing my son. Then all I remember was my brother visiting me and then darkness. Mother. She noticed the blonde boy lying there and walked towards him. He looked so much like her little baby boy that she had gazed upon only a few moments that it was almost as if she were approaching her own son. Mother, I have revived you. Father has been itching to see you again but he's still locked within me. Take the cloak lying in my bag. Put it on as you are. After all, no son would like the world to see his mother. I don't think I have the strength to be awake for anything but a few moments and I'd like you to take me to my apartment. Then he told her the address and pointed towards his bag before fainting. His energy had run out and his coils were slowly repairing themselves from the damage caused to them. She grabbed the cloak and saw that it looked suspiciously like her old Anbu cloak. She put it on and found that it covered her nicely. She sighed and went to pick up the boy who had apparently resurrected her. She didn't know what had happened but it seemed like she died and her son on orders of his father had resurrected her. The locked up part she didn't understand but it must have something to do with that seal he was working on last time she asked what he was doing. She slung the boy over her shoulder and went to the given address and knocked on the door once and saw that it was opened by a pretty girl with long black hair. She saw the boy and mumbled something about Naruto-kun and something else. Deciding that the name of her son confirmed his identity, she stepped inside and after that girl asked who she was, she just answered, "My name is Uchiha Miko and I'm Naruto's mother. He resurrected me from the realm of the dead and here I am." Haku was stunned by the revelation that Naruto had managed to resurrect his mother, but when she thought about it, he easily could have done so because of the Kyuubi. She shrugged and said, "Shall I prepare a bed for you?" Miko looked at the polite girl and said, "Sure. I think I'm going to have a talk with an old man about something if happened what I think has happened and then I'm going to make sure that you, me and Naruto go to live in my original house." They chatted for a few minutes before deciding that Haku would sleep with Naruto on his futon while Miko got Haku's bed. Haku actually offered that suggestion to be close to Naruto for some reason which she herself didn't know. Miko just smiled and mumbled something about young love. Then she went to bed too. None would know about the man hidden in the shadows a few kilometers from Konoha who she huckled and said, "Soon Sasuke-kun, you'll be all mine." Kukukukuku. He looked at his ceiling. It had been too long for him to remember having cuddled up to an attractive female who lay in his bed. He looked at Haku's sleeping face and suddenly realized that he was in his bed and with Haku in the same bed as he was. Somehow he had gotten in bed and Haku had also gotten into his bed. Hearing a soft humming come out of the kitchen, he began to get up out of bed and softly slipped from between the sheets, letting Haku sleep. When he got to the kitchen, he noticed a black-haired woman making some rice on the stove. He just gaped at the woman as she turned around and said, "Have you slept well, Naruto-kun?" He remembered everything that had happened but still it hadn't fully penetrated his mind. How the hell could a human show such kindness towards one such as him? But he remembered her being his mother and mothers often have a soft spot for their children. After he had looked at her, he said, "I'll go wake Haku-chan." With that he turned around and suddenly got an evil idea in his mind. Why not amuse himself a little and actually remove some clothing from Haku? After all, he was still a hot-blooded young male, so while his mother would be able to bear a half-woman roaming through the house, he would enjoy it because he would have a good view of Haku's s. You better keep away from that train of thought, Naruto-kun. You'll take her whenever I want you to take her and her into submission. Naruto's face fell a little, and when he was about to open his door, the door opened and Haku came out and looked sleepily at him. Clearly she was sleepy or something, but he didn't mind. He sighed out loud and looked at her and said, Mom wants you at the table in 10 minutes, Haku-chan. Since you are my girlfriend, I think it is best you hurry. After all, it wouldn't do well to disappoint the mother of your boyfriend. With a smile in place, he walked back to find his mother setting the table. Instinctively he began to help her out, and as they had finished setting the table, Haku appeared with her long black hair unbound, making her look like a typical beauty with her long hair and great ETS. After breakfast was finished, a few knocks were heard on the door and Miko went to see who was there. When she opened the door and peered outside, she saw a young man in a chunin vest standing there. Hello. Why are you here? She said, and the man stiffened a little at hearing her voice. Might I ask who you are and what you are doing in my student's house? Iruka was looking at the woman, who was still looking at him with irritation in his gaze. He wanted to talk to Naruto about the chunin exams that would be held within a few days. The strange woman looked strangely familiar to him, as if he had seen her before. Well, I'm Naruto's mother, freshly from the realm of the dead. She actually giggled as he looked at her with wide eyes. Yes, and I think I'd like to have a little talk with the Hokage. After all, since my son apparently manifested the Kekkei Genkai of our clan, I want to make sure that he is once again able to live in his ancestral home and not in this crappy apartment. She looked at him with a look that bordered on insanity, and the man actually recoiled as somehow he got the image of a fully grown Sharingan staring at him. He had in his life met 3 people who had their Sharingan activated, and that still made for a scary sight. She bade him inside, and when the man was inside, he looked at her. She seemed to be around her mid-20s. Something about the statement about her being revived from the dead irked him. How the hell had Naruto known who the hell his mother was? But then the answer came to him. The Kyuubi must have told the boy in some attempt to get out or something. But here stood a woman radiating something that was odd. She was radiating something that rubbed him the wrong way and made him want to attack her. It puzzled him for a few moments, but then he figured what it was. The Kyuubi's chakra must still be within the body, and thus making him hostile to the woman due to the fact that she possessed some of that aura of dread that surrounded the Kyuubi. Then he noticed the pair sitting there talking to each other, and a smile came to Iruka's face. To see Naruto talking with that girl so carefree made him happy, seeing that face all happy. Normally Naruto looked like he was angry at someone, or just a hyper or blonde who wouldn't shut up. Suddenly he noted the woman who introduced herself as Naruto's mom say something. Naruto-kun, I'm going to talk to the Hokage for a bit. I'll be back around noon. Naruto looked at his mother and said back at a casual tone, sure mom. I'll help Haku-chan cook some dinner. The woman looked at the pair and said, and if you decide to have on the counter, then please don't make too much of a mess. I remember that you're a father, and I did it once and it was very difficult to explain the stains on his coat. She added with a grin on her face that was eerily reminiscent of her son. Moom. She laughed and then was gone from sight. Naruto just sighed and continued his sentence. I'd just take her against the wall. That had the rather comical effect of both Iruka and Haku blushing beet red. Naruto just grinned and said, I can't help it that I got a perverted kitsune living in my stomach, occasionally playing strip poker with me. She's urging me to get some action or else suffer stomach cramps for the rest of my life. Then he took a look at the clock and his eyes went wide. I'm late. Within 10 seconds he was gone, dressed in full combat gear, off towards the building where the chunin exams would be taking place. He got there just in time. He slammed open the door just to see Kakashi talking to Sasuke and Sakura about them not being able to join the chunin exams without Naruto. Immediately a Kaden jutsu was sent at him and Kakashi avoided it. The man grinned and said, you're ready to enter then. Good luck. Naruto grinned and stepped inside. He looked around for anyone who stood out a little and noticed a GR nin who seemed to have an unusually high concentration of chakra around him. Something familiar was there about that guy, and Naruto vowed to keep an eye on that guy during the exam. Then there was a team that consisted of a guy wrapped in bandages and one guy that looked like some girl with those clothes that screamed that they were gay. The spiky hair only identified the kid as a male. Then there was a girl with long black hair. She seemed odd, like she didn't really want to be here. Take her as a pet. She could be of some use if the Kekai Genkai she has is what I think it is. With that, the Kyuubi went back to looking at the other people in the room. Naruto sat down and then a large poof of smoke was seen and the examiners appeared standing there. Naruto noted a familiar face between them and sighed. How the hell was she here at this time? He just accepted it for the moment, but still Haku stood there smiling at him in particular. He quickly made a few signals in Anbu code. How the hell did you get here? She lifted an eyebrow and signaled back. I got selected as an examiner. Naruto's eye twitched and he signaled to her. Never mind 10. But I'm still going to do what I said when we were at home. Maybe not up against a wall, but somewhere comfortable at least. Having against a wall should be somewhat uncomfortable to you. Haku was keeping a straight face through all of that while Ibiki just stood there looking at the people assembled there and noted the communication between the two. He sighed momentarily before speaking up and breaking up a small fight between some sound guys and a genin from Konoha. Listen up, you bastards. This is the first exam. I'm your head examiner Morino Ibiki. This is a test of your knowledge, so listen up. You start with 10 points for 10 questions. Every time you answer a question wrongly, then you get 1 point deducted from your score. Every time a teammate answers wrongly on a question, all of you lose a point. Any questions? Nobody had a question and sheets of paper were given out to the genin who set to work. Naruto looked at the sheet and sighed. These questions would be too difficult for normal genin, so he would have to cheat. There is that girl sitting next to him who is using those weird bleak eyes. Don't worry, all will be fine, Naruto-chan. I'll take extra good care of you. Let's show all of those worthless humans what a real Uchiha is capable of, shall we? With that, a dreadful chakra appeared around Naruto. It was invisible, but it could still be felt. Dread was seeping through everyone in the room except for Naruto. He felt totally at ease, as if he were in some sort of trance. He looked at the sheet and began writing the answers down and added a small note to the bottom of it. Ibiki-san, the next time you try to intimidate us or something, try to at least use some of your killing intent. It makes it a lot more believable. And if you did use some, I didn't feel it. Yours sincerely, Uzumaki Naruto. With that done, he stopped emanating the aura and he watched as several teams quit immediately. He grinned with his eyes briefly turning red for a second, which went unnoticed by everyone. Then the last question was announced and Ibiki said that everyone paid. Then the GL of a nearby window shattered and a woman named Mitarashi Anko jumped through the window wearing a cheerful smile with most of her clothing covered in blood and other gory bits. Hi people, it's me, the incredibly and still single Mitarashi Anko and the examiner for the second part of the exam. Naruto looked at her for a moment and stated quite loudly, no wonder you're still single. You're so insane that nobody wants to be around you. That reserved a glare for him and she said, who the hell do you think you are? Naruto looked at her and said, Uzumaki Naruto, and probably the only one who would ever classify you as a damn hot woman. What I just said was just the general opinion about you. She raised an eyebrow and said, ah well, at least if there's one person who thinks I'm hot, and why then I can't complain. And are you offering to become my boyfriend or something? Naruto just looked at her and said, except that my mother would say something about me negotiating with the likes of you, yeah. I'd love to hear you scream my name as loudly as possible. With that, he flashed her a grin which held razor-sharp teeth which blinked in the light and obviously scared the hell out of every genin in the room except for the one with the silver hair and the glees and the gr nin and gara. Please stop with the foreplay, Anko, and get to work. I'm sick of you dilly-dallying with some guy who is younger than you. That earned Ibiki the glare of the Tokubetsu Junin and of the container of the Kyuubi no Kitsunes, whose eyes became two red pits of hell itself. You dare say something like that to me, you lowly mortal. Ibiki looked at the glares from both the Kyuubi as well as Anko and sighed, just get on with it. I want to go back home to my nice torture rooms. It's so much fun torturing the hell out of Nukenin that I hate giving exams. With that, the man disappeared in a poof of smoke. Anko turned to the genin and said, alright guys, let me tell you something about the next exam. This time it will be taking place in a few days, so you'll have some time to rest up a little and prepare yourself for what's to come. I'll cut you in half at least. It's so exciting seeing young kids like you get butchered. Cuckoo. The creepy laughter that came from Anko's mouth was a clear indication that this woman wasn't sane anymore, and most genin except a few who didn't feel fear pushed themselves as far away as possible. I want all of you to report to Area 44 in 3 days. See you then. With that, she was gone as well as Naruto. Haku disappeared only moments later in hot pursuit of the maniacal woman who had grabbed her Naruto-kun. While not being a pervert, she really did want to do it sometime just to feel what it was like. She wasn't about to let some woman take her Naruto-kun. He looked as the roofs of Konoha flashed under him. He didn't know why the Tokubetsu Junin had decided to grab him, and he didn't want to find out, but the hail of ice and Bon was a good indication that Haku was in hot pursuit. He sighed briefly and then decided that he didn't want to do very much except to enjoy the show. Give him back. Haku screamed at the Tokubetsu Junin, who just grinned and screamed back. I saw him first. He's mine. A hailstorm of ice and Bon was the only answer to that, and Anko had to duck under them very fast or she'd be hit by them. In another part of the village, another scene was taking place. Get here, you old geezer. With the Sharingan in her eyes spinning madly, she threw an unfortunate Anbu right at his companion and sent the two of them to the floor. The woman was a force to be reckoned with because she was now single-handedly bringing down 3 Anbu. Being a former Junin before dying, she possessed the skills to take on up to 4 Anbu. The Hokage appeared on the scene only to duck as an Anbu went sailing over his head. Please calm down, miss. He saw her turn towards him and his eyes widened marginally as he saw the spinning Sharingan. Suddenly his eyes went even wider as she appeared in front of him and shouted right in his face. How could Yui let my precious little angel live in that dump that he called home? The killing intent of an enraged mother was washing of the Hokage, and he briefly considered his options at the time. This woman was distraught about something, and the only way that this could be solved was to ask what the hell was wrong. What do you mean, miss? My son Kazama Naruto, carrier of the greater Yukai Kyuubi, was living in a goddamn dump Sarutobi. I want him in his ancestral mansion by tonight, or else I'm going to take this to the council. I, Kazama Miko, wife of the deceased Yondaime Hokage, wish that my son aka Naruto will live in the home of my family aka the Uchihas. The Sandame's eyes looked at the woman and said, That's impossible. Kazama Miko died in childbirth. Her eyes flickered briefly and she said, Well, my little angel resurrected me by some miracle or something, but I don't care. All I want is that the 3 of us get to live in the Uchiha mansion with any of my remaining family if they are still alive. The Hokage scratched himself behind his left ear and said, Well, the only Uchiha that still lives there is Uchiha Sasuke. Technically Naruto and he should be cousins due to the fact that you are Makoto's sister. I think that Sasuke would like some company since his brother killed off most of the Uchiha when he was 13. The poor boy has since then been obsessing about killing his brother. Miko shook her head sadly. My prick of a brother would have done anything to keep that from happening. Itachi was a good kid, he wouldn't do such a thing unless it was necessary for the clan. What I remember is that he used to be such a happy kid. Let me go. A screaming Naruto was dragged past the window by Anko, and Haku was in pursuit with several ice and Bon flying past the window at Anko, who was now sporting a few scratches. The Hokage and Miko just looked as the threesome sped past, and Miko could not help but make a remark about it. He's so much like his father, always getting the attention of multiple ladies at the same time. I wonder if he's going to do the same like we used to do, letting another woman in our bed from time to time. That moment was the time that the Hokage's nose exploded in a shower of blood. Miko just grinned and said, Still a hentai, nay. With that she left, making sure to leave a note that they were going to live in the Uchiha mansion and that there was nothing he could do about. Naruto just looked in amazement as he felt snakes fly past him as Anko initiated her counter-attack, and he watched as they missed their target as Haku summoned up an ice mirror. He sighed and just wanted to get away. For the first 10 minutes it was actually nice to see the fight between the women, but now it was getting rather annoying. You should feel honored that you've got 3 women fighting over you. The voice of Kyuubi drew him out of his daze and he mumbled something that sounded something like, What the? He looked at Anko, who just wore a maniacal grin so much like his old sensei who had taught him that genjutsu and a few ninjutsu. It really was a shame that he had gone away suddenly, since the man hadn't stared at him with the usual hatred of the villagers and shinobi, but rather regarded him as some sort of study object. The man had been so kind as to invite him in his home a few times, where he met a girl who was older than him. He guessed that her age would be around 17 or something. The man had often called him one of his prize students as he completed a jutsu he was taught by the man. They mostly had a relation to snakes or were emulating poison or other things like that. The man's long black hair had often been arranged in a mess as the man had practiced with the young girl and began to praise her on her progress. Then suddenly the man had left and the girl had seemingly disappeared too. She smelled kinda like Anko. If only he could remember that girl's name, then he might be able to track her down. He sighed as he was once again busy evading some of the Senbon needles that Haku had thrown at Anko. He released a small amount of the Kyuubi's chakra and wriggled free of Anko's grip, and then ran over the roofs until he couldn't run anymore and figured that he was far away from the two women. He noticed a man standing there talking to a Konoha genin with whitish, silverish hair. The long black hair and the yellow snake-like eyes were a clear indication that this man was either related to the sensei that had taught him. The manner of speaking was also reminiscent of the man, and Naruto's eyes went wide as he recalled the name of his sensei and shouted, "Orochi sensei." The first clue that a person was present there when he was just instructing Kabuto on what to do was the small thump of shoes hitting the tile. Nonetheless, he continued giving his instructions, knowing that he could get away easily enough. Kabuto was skilled enough to beat a Junin easily, so that wasn't a thing that he needed to worry about. He turned around when a cry of, "Orochi sensei," was heard and let a small smile slip onto his face. So the boy had come back to him after he had needed to leave the village and had detected the presence of his sensei once again. While he didn't hate the boy for what he carried, he had always taken into account the fact that the kid might be dangerous, but when he had seen the treatment of Naruto by the village, he had decided to do something about it. He was a Junin at the time and he might be a little bit too anxious to learn the immortality jutsu, but it still tugged at his heartstrings to see a kid getting abused by the villagers. A memory had come back to him once he had seen Naruto trudge home with bruises forming on the skin, and he remembered a pale young boy who had suffered at the hands of his father for looking too much like his mother. He had gotten her pale features and her looks and long black hair, and he saw the disgust in his father's eyes. Focusing on the boy, he saw the muscles beneath the clothes and smiled at the boy. Truly, he had grown. Now should be the time to teach him a few techniques that would require a good deal of chakra manipulation. The boy would be learning how to become as fast as a striking cobra and to be as deadly as the snakes. Uzumaki Naruto would be a great student, which would change the fate of Konoha. Orochimaru didn't know how right he was as his student came to him with a cheerful smile on his face. The first question that came from his mouth was, "When are you going to destroy Konoha?" Orochimaru looked at his young student and then closed his eyes. Had the boy somehow read his mind? He dismissed Kabuto with a hand gesture and then turned to Naruto. "I'll train you if you tell me why you want to know when I'll destroy Konoha." Naruto just smiled and said, "Deal." Then he went into a small explanation of how fed up he was with Konoha and about the reason he joined as a shinobi, just to learn how to kill people in the most gruesome ways. Orochimaru was pleased with his student. Seeing as there were only 2 days left, he spoke. "I'll train you tomorrow and then you'll learn a taijutsu style known only to me and my daughter. I'll meet you in this spot at exactly 6 a.m. With that, he was gone in a whirl of leaves, and Naruto was smiling at the spot where the man had stood for only a few seconds ago. He sighed and said, "Konoha, you'll feel the power of me and the Kyuubi no Kitsune once again. I have judged you and you have been found guilty. Let the red blood spill forth from your inhabitants and taint the streets." With that, he was gone off to find his mother. She would need to be informed that he was going to train with someone that he trusted. The next morning he appeared in the same spot waiting for his apprentice. He would need to put out all the stops and teach the kid something useful. Pity was something that was almost foreign to him, but in reality he was just a man with a wish for immortality and a drive to learn any jutsu in existence. The snakes were his to command, and that was a good thing because most of his jutsus relied upon snakes or emulating snakes. The taijutsu style he was going to teach Naruto would make sure that there was a distinct speed advantage and that the enemy was disabled quickly. Orochimaru briefly considered just teaching the kid the standard style, but what the kid had said about destroying Konoha had prompted him to think it over a little bit and thus decide to teach him the advanced style. The style that could even defeat a Hyuga of the main branch, as Orochimaru had won a battle with Hyuga Hiashi just after he had defected from Konoha. His apprentice appeared right on time and not even exhausted. He studied his apprentice carefully and noticed a mark on his neck, what seemed to be a hickey or something. Raising an eyebrow but not commenting on it, he just said, "Let's go, we're training at the ground I trained at. I'll instruct you in the style there." Naruto wondered what his sensei was up to. The man seemed to be distracted or something and was not at all focused on him. Perhaps something had happened to throw his plans into disorder. He always seemed to be mulling over things whenever Naruto saw the older man, and Naruto just heard the man speak about a training ground. Naruto briefly thought about how he would learn under this sensei. He had briefly caught a glimpse of him and his daughter training, and what he'd seen made his heart swell with excitement. "You aren't very excited in the last few days. You haven't even come to visit me, and I'm getting bored with beating your dad in poker. Come on, I want to. I don't even care if you summon me into the real world to do so. I just want to feel you in me and feel your sweaty body on mine as we both are feeling the ecstasy at its highest peak." The Kyuubi let out a perverted giggle as she thought about it. Naruto just mumbled something under his breath about horny kitsunes and that they never have had enough, but continued following his teacher. Orochimaru stopped at the training grounds and then stood there, and a Konoha hitai was tied around his head. He looked at his student and said, "You're going to learn a style of taijutsu that relies on speed and pure fear. It allows you to kill someone from a distance by either paralyzing his body and then using a kunai or something that can kill as a weapon and either cut the throat or impale the forehead. The only requirements to learning this are that you will need to use this style at least once on an opponent to make sure you know it. It won't be easy, as this style isn't learned within a day or in a week, but since we only have 2 days, I'll make sure to at least teach you as much as possible." Naruto just looked at the man and then said, "Sure. Teach it to me and I'll have it down within the day. I learned Kage Bunshin within 4 hours, so this style is no different." Orochimaru just nodded and began to slip into a battle stance. Then he attacked a training dummy with speed that was barely visible to the eye. The training dummy turned into dust as Orochimaru stopped, and Naruto could see that the man wasn't even exhausted. That was a small sample of what the style can do. "Now you try it." Naruto got into the stance that Orochimaru had used, and the man looked at him with an eye that scanned for any flaws. No, you are doing it all wrong. You need to bend your leg a little bit more to gain more speed. And your hands are in the wrong place. Try it like this." Orochimaru got into a stance which Naruto copied almost exactly. He watched how the man's legs were bent and took notes on how he held his hands. He looked at the dummy in front of him and watched how his sensei slowly went through the attacks and not utilized all his normal speed but just went extremely slow for him. Naruto just watched as Orochimaru's hands shot out and rammed through the dummy's shoulders. Obviously, what was slow for Orochimaru was fast for a normal genin, even with a Kyuubi sealed within his stomach. Naruto sighed and tried moving like his sensei. He rammed his hands within the dummy but slightly missed some points where his arms were to hit. Orochimaru just gave him a disappointed glare and then promptly instructed him on how he could make sure that everything would work. By the time that noon had come around, Naruto could execute an attack so that it hit 60% of the time. To Orochimaru, he was just a tool or something like that, but if he played his cards right, he could reap the benefits. Orochimaru was a cold-hearted bastard just like himself, but seemed to possess some traits like kindness, but it was locked away very deep within the recesses of his soul. He never seemed to get used to his sensei's creepiness, as it just clung to the man like a cloud of flies to a dead body which is bloated from all the jets that heap up inside of it. He looked at the training dummy once again and summoned up all of his willpower and then rammed his hands straight through it and did the combo move and even began to improve on it so it could be used better without losing speed. Instead of the shoulders, he aimed for the arm muscles in case the opponent decided to block. In real life it wouldn't have mattered very much, but this time the dummy's arms were blown off by the impact and Orochimaru found it fit to comments. A rather nice variation on it, although I'd like to tell you that that was the follow-up combo that I was intending to teach you. I see that you've successfully utilized the brains you seem to possess and have found the follow-up within a mere training session. Now I'll go through the forms that you'll need to master by the end of the day if you want to learn the style before the time limit is up. With that, Orochimaru looked at another dummy and Naruto could feel killing intent stream out of the man and at the dummy, which had no effect. Then Orochimaru drew a kunai and it lodged within the dummy's forehead exactly. Naruto just looked at it and scoffed. Is that everything? Then he looked at the dummy and focused all of his hatred and killing intent for Konoha on the dummy, and an even stronger killing intent was generated. Naruto grabbed a kunai with a white-knuckled grip and threw it at the dummy's forehead, which literally exploded as the kunai was covered by a small amount of chakra when Naruto had thrown it. A few claps came from the side as Orochimaru looked at his student's work. Wonderful, Naruto-kun. I'm glad that you have gotten it so quickly. But now I must depart, or else they might even try to arrest me for trespassing on Konoha property. If they see you training, then they'll just assume that it was your aura or something that can be explained by the Kyuubi. I'll see you tomorrow around the same time as today on this training field. Tomorrow we will train until dusk, is that understood? Naruto just nodded and the man teleported away in a swirl of leaves. Naruto just picked up all the kunai that had been left on the field and then went home. He looked at his mother who stood there waiting for him and she said, "We're moving out. Come on." He gave her a look and just followed. They walked through the streets with Miko dressed in a typical Junin outfit and not receiving any glares, while he was dressed in black slacks and was being glared at. He sighed briefly as they pet another crowd of hatred-filled villagers, and when his mother led him to a large mansion with a fan embroidered upon its walls, she said, "I lived here a long time ago. I wonder how my little nephew is doing." At that same moment, Sasuke rounded the corner and looked at them and said, "Dobi, what are you doing here? This is private property." Miko turned around and said, "You must be little Sasuke-kun. I have heard so much about your pregnancy from my sister. You must have been adorable when you were born." Sasuke just stared at the strange woman dressed in a Junin uniform and said, "Excuse me, I don't think I ever met this sister of yours, so I would like it if you disappeared from my house." Miko got a twitching and bulging vein on her forehead and said while activating her Sharingan, "Listen well, young man, I will not to be talked to in that way. I may not be your mother, but I am at least your aunt, and that means that Naruto is your cousin. So be polite against him and me and we'll get along fine." "Got it." Sasuke just gave a small nod of acknowledgement and then went back inside muttering something about how vengeance would not be delayed. I liked Itachi better. At least he knew when to talk to his aunt with his shoulders straight and looking me in the eye. This little brat only makes me feel uncomfortable. I'll get some manners into the kid even if I got to beat them into him. With that, the two Sharingan users, mother and son, went inside the large mansion to get settled in. Haku would come later to get her own room, and Naruto went to bed immediately to get well rested and be in top shape for the training that would occur the next morning till evening. She looked at the raven-haired boy in front of her. She had summoned him into this room with the intent to teach him a little bit about respecting his elders, especially since she was now officially the clan head due to her statues as the eldest Uchiha still alive. She looked at his form and then said, "Sit, Sasuke-kun." He seated himself on his knees and then bowed like it should. But still his form was a little bit off. He looked at her with defiance in his eyes and she mentally counted to 10 after closing her eyes and then looking again at those defiant ones. "Sasuke-kun, you need to make yourself free of all emotions and just behave like any heir to a respective family should." His only answer to that was one short message. "HN." She looked at him and hoped that some sense could be talked into the kid. She'd seen her son go off to train with some mysterious sensei and then had taken Sasuke into her room to teach him the etiquette of the family. Naruto was busy trying to correct his stance when he heard a voice in his head. "Want to have a little bit of help, Naruto? I'm here for you. And since I was Hokage once, I can teach you one ultra cool move which will surely grant you the place of Chunin if you show some intelligence." Arashi looked from his prison cell at the man teaching his son on the outside and said, "I don't think Orochimaru can be trusted very much. He defected from the village and thus is a newcanon of SCL rank. Maybe you should just do what that nice girl suggested and just do a threesome." A smack was heard and Kyuubi's voice interrupted Yondaimi's speech. "Make that a foursome. I'll be there once you are going to try and some girl." The mental cheering for a foursome or at least some went on for the better part of the morning. Sakura and Ino were both coming to visit Sasuke-kun to profess their eternal love to the boy. When they got close to the Uchiha estate, they heard some strange sounds. Something like a whip being used on someone who was crying out in pain. For a moment they listened, and then they noticed that their precious Sasuke-kun was the one crying in agony. Ino pig, I'm going to rescue Sasuke-kun. With that, Sakura sped towards the place where the sounds were coming from and just slammed open the door to wander into a spectacle which she would hope to see again, but then with her in the position of Sasuke. He was being spanked by an older woman who kept spanking him with her hand. It was actually pretty funny to see such a tough guy break down from just giving him a good spanking. It would actually teach him to do something good for once. Her Sharingan took note of someone entering the room she was in and then looked at the person in question and saw a young pink-haired girl and mentally noted that this must be the girl that was on Naruto's team. She took note of the look on the girl's face and saw that there was shock within them and some surprise and surprisingly some lust in them. Then a blonde girl came in and noticed the scene. That was the moment she decided to speak up. May I please know who you are? Sakura just looked at the woman and shouted. What the hell are you doing to Sasuke-kun? She looked with flaming eyes, not unlike a genin with big eyebrows, and inner Sakura spoke. Tell the old woman her place that only we have the right to spank Sasuke-kun. Miko looked at the girls and said. I'm disciplining him. Sakura spoke up just before Ino could speak. Hentai. You keep your hands off Sasuke-kun, you old woman. Miko looked at the girl with her black eyes and said. Quick to judge me, Miss Haruno. She gently put Sasuke on the floor where he lay with his still red. She stood up to her full height and nonetheless towered above Sakura, and the Sharingan activated more fiercely than ever before, and she said at a frosty tone. How dare you? How would you even dare to think that I was doing something with my own goddamn nephew? I know that breaking into someone's house is considered illegal, so tell me what you're doing here. Sakura just stammered something about her darling Sasuke-kun and then went to stand next to Ino, who just looked embered by her friend's behavior. Miss, we'd like to apologize for intruding, but we were worried that something happened to Sasuke-kun. She fidgeted for a few seconds while under the steely gaze of Naruto's mom, and then finally Miko spoke. I'm sure Sasuke-kun won't mind if you girls were here to help him with his manners. Sasuke, please show your girlfriends the mansion and stay out of your nephew's room. The last time I checked, it was wired with some traps and I don't want you getting hurt. He must have received his father's talent at setting traps. Arashi was always so eager to put up traps whenever we did it in some place open to the general public. With a small blush on her face, she left the girls and her nephew, which were all blushing except Sasuke, who just looked moderately embered. Naruto looked at the dummy in front of him and began to focus his chakra around his arms, making sure that it flowed there at a steady rhythm, and then released the power with an ear-splitting yell within his mind as some sort of mental torture for those that resided there. The only thing that happened was himself getting a splitting headache from all the sound that he was hearing within his mind. Within the cage, Kyuubi had put some of her tails in her ears to block out the yells. Arashi just used his hands to shield his ears and mumble something about ungrateful kids and how he should never have made Naruto exist in the first place if he knew the headache he would get. Orochimaru just looked impavely at his apprentice. Already the kid was showing remarkable talent in the style, and he had no worries that he wouldn't get it down. There was only one final combo to be taught, and then most enemies waiting for Naruto would fall as easy prey in the Chunin exams. He looked at his apprentice and said, Alright Naruto-kun, enough with that combination move, and now let's move on until you get the final part, and then I finally will give you some amount of mastery over the style. You have mastered the most efficient moves within the style, and thus after me and my daughter Anko, you are the only practitioner of this style, so I'd like to tell you that you should at least try to practice the style regularly. These moves are the only thing that stands between you and the full mastery. Beware that they are as dangerous as that fool guy's moves. One wrong move and you're dead. Open all 6 gates like I taught you to. The Kyuubi should be able to take most of the damage to your body away. This is solely a killing move. With that, Orochimaru got in a stance, and emerald chakra swirled around him and then turned into a bright blue and then finally settled on a deep purple. Then a succession of strikes was launched at the dummy which totally pulverized the material. Naruto just looked at it and then shut off his Sharingan. So far Orochimaru hadn't noticed his usage of the Sharingan, and Naruto was happy for that because the man would start harping about unfair advantages. He began to open his demonic gates courtesy of the Kyuubi and then opened up the sixth gate, which made a red chakra flow around him in a chaotic pattern, making bits of dirt turn into dust and nothingness as the awesome power was released into the air. Then with a battle cry Naruto attacked, and then the dummy jerked back and began to turn into dust. A slight widening of his eyes betrayed Orochimaru's only small discomfort as he looked at the remains. As if by some sort of strange phenomenon, his student managed to channel unholy chakra in the attack and thus improved on the technique by adding an unknown amount of power. Think of what could happen if used against an opponent. The results would probably be devastating. He dismissed Naruto for the time being, saying that he had enough of his presence and would like some peace and quiet. He looked at the trees surrounding the training ground and then sighed and turned into a leaf storm as he left. Naruto was happy that he was released so soon, and he began to make haste to get back home when he suddenly noted that strange girl from the exams, the one with the long hair. He landed right next to her and said, "Hi." She turned around and looked at him with cool eyes and said, "What?" She looked kind of irritated, and he took one look at her attire and heard a mental snicker in his head. She has the gall to talk to you like that. Let's kill her. Kyuubi was getting insulted by the girl's Sasuke-ish attitude, and Naruto couldn't help but remark on it. "I just wanted to talk to you about some things, but now I get the kind of answer Sasuke would give me. If you don't regard me with at least some respect, then I'll kill you in the exam. Here I was wanting to get to know you a little bit better, but all you do is snap at me with an attitude." Seeing a blonde kid get so excited about her answer, she just got out on of her bells and began casting a genjutsu that hopefully would make him afraid enough to leave her alone. The pathetic attempt made Naruto snort. He looked at her and said, "Don't even try that pathetic genjutsu on me. I've seen worse things than what you could make me believe. I daily see the horrors of society at its worst level, and still you dare to try and make me afraid. Well, little girl, I'll make sure that you'll scream for your life once I cast my genjutsu on you in the exam. Take note of my name, as I will find you in the Chunin exam. Uzumaki Naruto will crush you, little girl. Be sure of that." Arashi and Kyuubi had taken over for a short amount of time and then began to recede back in the distance of his mind. Naruto looked at the girl with crimson eyes and said, "I'd like to know the name of the one that's going to die by my hand. Not even Orochi-sensei can make me abandon this course of action. Though you are of his village, I will not show any mercy." This kid was trained by Orochimaru-sensei. Oh shit, I may be in trouble now. Well, let's give him my name and then let's get out of here. I don't want to be around this blonde freak. The name is Tsuchi-kin, and I'll kill you in the exam. Naruto let out dark laughter at her remark and said, "You can never defeat me with just your pathetic skills. Not even sensei would be able to defeat me if I go all out. Konoha would be destroyed by it if I simply walked around not even using the power." With that, he was gone and back on the rooftops, leaving a frightened girl behind. Naruto felt better than before. He looked at the shinobi ping by him and noticed not many of them were standing still but were constantly moving. He noticed a pair of them standing still, and apparently they were quarreling about something. "No, I won't do that. Damn you, Gecko, I won't do that with you yet. I may love you, but I'm not going to sacrifice my virginity just yet. We got together only a week ago and I'm not going to do it yet, so stop bugging me about it." The female apparently was dressed in Anbu gear, as she wore black all over her body with a mask hanging to the side. The other was a Junin apparently, and the man seemed to be talking softly, and suddenly her hand lashed out and threw a powder right in his face, making him cough for a while, and she said, "Here, take that. You better not ask that of me again, or else the effects will be much worse than the small respiration disturbance powder you just inhaled." With that, she was off, leaving a coughing man with black hair standing there. Naruto paid it no more heed as he sped past the man and back to his house. He better rest up before getting to the exam tomorrow. He never expected to find two Junin lying in his bed together, sleeping rather heavily. He just raised an eyebrow at that before wondering how the hell both Anko and Haku would ever get into an agreement. Little did he know that the pair was put into that bed by his mother, who'd gotten annoyed with the two women. Naruto just slipped into bed and went to sleep, ignorant of the fact that both women would love to take advantage of him if they got the choice whether to sleep with him. The morning would bring some surprises for all of them.